September 24, 1971. 2:47 p.m. Henry Ford Hospital, Detroit, Michigan. The maternity ward hummed with the ordinary sounds of a Tuesday afternoon. Beeping monitors, the soft footsteps of nurses in white shoes, the distant cry of newborns. Room 312. A white metal crib. A 1-year-old boy named Christopher Hayes lay inside it, his small frame barely visible beneath a pale blue hospital blanket. He was supposed to stay there. He was supposed to be safe. By 3:15 p.m. he was gone. Not escaped. Not moved to another room by a forgetful nurse. Gone. Vanished. A child simply erased from a locked hospital ward in broad daylight, with security protocols in place and professional staff on duty. No ransom note. No witnesses. No explanation. Just an empty crib and a silence that would echo through 5 decades. A mother received a phone call at 3:32 p.m. The words came in fragments. Your son, missing, hospital, police. The world stopped. What happened next would spawn decades of unanswered questions, destroyed families, frantic searches, and one genealogy test that would finally, impossibly, bring a missing child home. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. If this case hits home for you, let us know. Subscribe now. Christopher Hayes was born in 1970, a beautiful, healthy infant with curious eyes and a future stretching before him like any other child. His parents loved him fiercely the way parents do. They held him through sleepless nights. They watched his tiny features for signs of personality, of intelligence, of the man he might become. They made plans. They dreamed. By September 1971, Christopher had spent 1 year learning the world. 1 year of growing, developing, becoming the person only his parents knew. He wasn't famous. He wasn't important to the wider world. He was simply a child, which meant everything to the people who loved him. Henry Ford Hospital was considered one of Detroit's finest medical facilities. Its maternity ward was sterile, professional, safe, or so everyone believed. The walls were institutional white. The floors gleamed. Everything smelled of disinfectant and competence. This was a place where children were supposed to be protected. On the morning of September 24th, Christopher's parents brought him to the hospital for observation. A minor infection, doctors said. Routine. He would stay overnight. It was precautionary. Nothing serious. His mother held him one more time before the nurses took him away. She kissed the top of his head. She didn't know that would be the last time she held her son as a child. The hospital nursery was designed to be secure. Mothers couldn't simply wander through. There were protocols. There were staff members trained to watch infants. There was a system in place, a system that would fail catastrophically that afternoon. Around 2:30 p.m., a shift change occurred. Nurses rotated. Attention fragmented across multiple tasks. The handoff wasn't seamless. It was human. Imperfect. A gap formed, a small opening in the wall of protection. And through that gap, Christopher disappeared. His parents had no way of knowing their son was about to begin a life they would never witness. They had no idea that somewhere, someone was walking out of Henry Ford Hospital with their child. They had no way of knowing that 53 years would pass before they learned the truth about what happened to their son on that September afternoon. The afternoon unfolds like a tragedy written in real time. 2:15 p.m., a nurse checks on Christopher. He's asleep in his crib, breathing steadily. The infection is mild. The doctors expect full recovery. Everything is routine. 2:30 p.m., shift change begins. The afternoon nurses arrive. The morning shift briefs them on patients. Christopher Hayes is mentioned in passing, 1-year-old in room 312, minor infection, stable. A note is made. Forms are filed. No one pays particular attention. Just another child in a hospital full of children. 2:45 p.m., the morning nurse finishes her shift. She leaves the ward. The afternoon nurse takes over responsibility for the nursery. She has 6 infants to monitor. Christopher is one of them. She settles into her routine, checking vitals, recording observations, responding to the demands of other patients. 2:47 p.m., a crib is empty. No one notices immediately. In the chaos of a busy maternity ward, 5, then 10, then 15 minutes pass. A nurse walks by Christopher's room and sees the crib. She assumes he's been moved for examination. She makes a mental note to check the records. Another nurse arrives for a scheduled observation. She notices the crib is empty. She checks the chart. No notation about where Christopher is. No record of any transfer. She asks a colleague, "Where's the Hayes boy?" No one knows. 3:15 p.m. The alarm is raised. A supervisor is notified. Hospital security is called. Christopher Hayes, aged 1, is officially reported missing. Within minutes, the hospital transforms from a place of healing into a crime scene. 3:20 p.m., Detroit Police Department receives the call. A child has vanished from a secure medical facility. Dispatch immediately flags it as a possible abduction. A priority alert goes out. All units are notified. 3:30 p.m., the first police officers arrive at Henry Ford Hospital. The maternity ward is locked down. No one enters. No one leaves. Security footage is pulled, though in 1971, it's limited and grainy. Hospital staff are separated for interviews. A timeline is constructed, moment by moment, searching for the exact instant when Christopher Hayes ceased to exist in their care. 3:32 p.m., Christopher's parents receive the call. Their world ends. By 4 p.m., the FBI has been notified. By 5 p.m., the hospital is swarming with federal agents, local police, detectives, and supervisors. By 6 p.m., every police department in Michigan has a description of a missing 1-year-old. The search has begun. But no one could have imagined it would last 53 years. The hospital becomes chaos. Controlled, professional chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Detectives fan out through the maternity ward, interviewing every staff member present that afternoon. 37 people worked within a reasonable proximity to Christopher's crib. 37 potential witnesses. 37 people are asked the same questions repeatedly. Did you see anything unusual? Anyone unfamiliar? Any interruption to normal routine? The answers blur together. No, nothing. Everything seemed normal. Meanwhile, the Hayes family is in freefall. Media crews arrive within hours. News vans line the hospital parking lot. By evening, local Detroit news is broadcasting the story, 1-year-old missing from Henry Ford Hospital. The phone in the police department starts ringing. Citizens call with tips. Most are useless. A woman claims she saw a suspicious person near the hospital. A man reports a car that didn't belong. A child claims she saw someone carrying a baby. Every lead is followed. Every lead leads nowhere. The FBI arrives in force. These are federal agents trained in kidnapping cases. They interview hospital administrators. They review security protocols. They examine the logistics of how a child could leave a secure facility. Theories multiply. Was it an inside job? A staff member with a grudge? A desperate woman wanting a child? A black market adoption ring? Detective Marcus Morrison arrives at the hospital at 4:15 p.m. on September 24th. He's a 12-year veteran of the Detroit Police Department, experienced, methodical, thorough. He walks through the maternity ward and something in him shifts. This case will define his career. He doesn't know it yet, but he's about to become obsessed with a child he's never met. By midnight, missing child posters are being printed. Christopher's photograph, a small boy with dark eyes and a gentle expression, appears on thousands of flyers. Missing child screams in bold letters. A description, 1-year-old, 24 pounds, dark hair, brown eyes. Last seen September 24, 1971, at Henry Ford Hospital. The posters go up everywhere. Gas stations, diners, shop windows, police stations. Every surface in Detroit bears Christopher's face. The first 48 hours produce nothing but questions. No arrests. No solid leads. No proof of life. Just the terrifying silence of a child who has vanished into the void. The Hayes family doesn't sleep. Detectives don't sleep. The city collectively holds its breath. By September 26th, one thing is certain. Christopher Hayes is truly gone. The only question remaining is where he went, and whether he's still alive. Detroit is traumatized. A 1-year-old has vanished from a locked hospital. If it could happen to Christopher Hayes, it could happen to anyone's child. Mothers grip their infants tighter. Hospital visits become anxiety-ridden. Trust in institutions fractures like glass. The case becomes the defining tragedy of 1971 in Michigan. Neighbors gather on street corners and whisper theories. A black market adoption ring, they say. A disturbed woman who couldn't have children of her own. A staff member with mental illness. A cult recruiting infants. Each theory is more sinister than the last. Speculation spreads like wildfire. Local restaurants have the case playing on televisions. Truckers discuss it at diners. Children at school draw pictures of the missing boy. Teachers use it as a cautionary tale, don't talk to strangers. The Hayes family's photograph appears in newspapers daily. They become the face of every parent's worst nightmare. The hospital becomes suspect number one in the court of public opinion. How could security fail so completely? How could a child simply disappear? Questions demand answers. Hospital administrators hold press conferences. They promise investigations. They promise accountability. But promises ring hollow when a child is missing. By the end of the first week, Christopher Hayes posters covered Detroit like wallpaper. His face is everywhere: storefronts, telephone poles, community centers. A little boy with dark eyes, frozen in time at 1 year old. Detroit divides into two groups: those who believe Christopher is alive somewhere, being raised by whoever took him, and those who fear the worst, that he's dead, buried in an unmarked grave, a victim of something incomprehensible. The community's collective consciousness is marked. For decades, older Detroiters would remember where they were when they heard about the missing boy at Henry Ford Hospital. It becomes a reference point, a tragedy that defined a generation. For the Hayes family, the trauma is visceral and immediate. They've lost their son. But they've also lost their privacy. Their grief is public. Their desperation is broadcast. They are no longer simply parents mourning a child. They are symbols, cautionary tales. The family that represents the unthinkable. Detective Marcus Morrison was 34 years old when he arrived at Henry Ford Hospital on the afternoon Christopher Hayes disappeared. He had a wife named Susan and 2 daughters at home. He was a good cop, competent, thorough, respected. But he was also human. And something about this case reached into him and never let go. The first week of the investigation consumed him entirely. 16-hour shifts blurred into 18-hour shifts. He interviewed hospital staff repeatedly, drilling down on inconsistencies. He reviewed security footage frame by frame, searching for a face, a gesture, any hint of guilt. He constructed timelines and then deconstructed them, looking for gaps in logic. His wife Susan asked him to come home. "You need sleep," she said. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, Morrison sat at his desk at the precinct, staring at Christopher's photograph. A 1-year-old. Innocent. Gone. It violated something fundamental in him: his sense of justice, his belief that the world made sense. By month 2, Morrison had interviewed 247 people. By month 6, that number had grown to 312. He developed theories. He constructed psychological profiles of potential kidnappers. He imagined what kind of person takes a child from a hospital. Someone with access? Someone with knowledge of the building? Someone desperate for a child of their own? Photos appeared on Morrison's desk. Christopher's picture. Photographs of Christopher's parents. Photographs of the hospital floor plan. His colleagues noticed. "Let it go, Marcus," they would say. "There are other cases." But Morrison couldn't let it go. No ransom note meant no clear motive. No witnesses meant no clear direction. Every lead was a dead end, and every dead end felt like a personal failure. Years passed. The Hayes family aged. Morrison aged. His hair grayed. His face developed permanent lines of worry. Susan grew accustomed to his late nights. His daughters grew up with a father who was physically present but mentally absent, haunted by a case that wouldn't be solved. The 1970s became the 1980s. Morrison's career advanced. He was promoted to sergeant. He handled other cases: murders, robberies, assaults. But Christopher Hayes remained his obsession. File number 4521 never left his desk. On his last day before a 2-week vacation, he would file it carefully. On his first day returning, he would pull it from the cabinet and begin again. Colleagues whispered. "Morrison's lost it," they said. "He's chasing ghosts." But Morrison knew something they didn't. Some cases choose you. And you can't choose to stop. Every cold case investigation generates leads. Most are false. The first promising lead in the Christopher Hayes case emerged 3 days after his disappearance. A woman in Cleveland, Ohio claimed to have a 1-year-old boy matching Christopher's description. Detective Morrison drove through the night. He arrived at a small house on a quiet street and knocked on the door. A woman answered. Behind her, a child cried. Morrison's heart raced. Could it be? He examined the boy carefully. Wrong. The child was younger with lighter hair. Not Christopher. Morrison drove back to Detroit, exhausted and disappointed. The second lead came in January 1972. A suspicious nurse at St. Mary's Hospital in Flint had quit suddenly after Christopher's disappearance. She had psychiatric history. She had access to infants. She was questioned for 14 hours. Polygraph tests proved inconclusive. But ultimately she cleared. No evidence connected her to Christopher. She was released. The third lead, a black market adoption ring operating in Michigan and Wisconsin. This one gained traction. FBI resources were devoted to the investigation. Dozens of interviews conducted. Adoption records were examined. But again nothing. The ring existed, investigations confirmed it, but Christopher wasn't among the children they trafficked. The trail went cold. By 1973, the leads had dried up completely. No new information. No new suspects. The Hayes case became part of Michigan's growing collection of unsolved disappearances. Detectives moved to fresh cases. The public's attention waned. News coverage shifted to new tragedies. But Detective Morrison continued. He interviewed peripheral figures again, searching for inconsistencies in their statements. He re-examined hospital security procedures, looking for someone who had slipped through without scrutiny. He developed theories about who might have taken Christopher and why. The problem was fundamental. Without evidence, without witnesses, without direction, the investigation was a ship without a compass. Every lead was a mirage. Every suspect was ultimately cleared. Every promising theory dissolved under examination. By the end of the first decade, Morrison had interviewed 247 people and cleared every single one of them. The investigation had reached a stalemate. Technology couldn't help. There was no DNA evidence. Forensics was limited in 1971. Fingerprints had been collected but led nowhere. Detective Morrison filed his final report on the Christopher Hayes disappearance in 1982. He wrote, "Subject Christopher Hayes, age 1, remains missing. Investigation ongoing. No definitive leads at this time. Case remains unsolved." He didn't know he would spend the next 42 years waiting for the answer. The decades blur together. The 1970s become the 1980s. The 1980s become the 1990s. The 1990s become the 2000s. Christopher Hayes' case exists in limbo, neither forgotten nor actively pursued. File number 4521 sits in police archives, occasionally pulled out by a new detective assigned the case, reviewed with frustration, then filed away again. Detective Morrison retires in 1995 at age 58. He has spent almost 25 years investigating a case that never resolved. His colleagues throw him a retirement party. They toast to his career, his dedication, his service. They don't mention Christopher Hayes. They know better. They know it would just reopen the wound. Morrison spends his retirement haunted. He tries to move on. He takes up fishing, spends time with his grandchildren, travels with his wife. But on September 24th every year he remembers. He pulls out newspaper clippings of the case, photographs of the hospital ward, the timeline he constructed decades before. He wonders, is Christopher alive? Is he happy? Does he know he was lost? The Hayes family also ages. Christopher's parents grow older. The initial shock gives way to a permanent ache, a grief that never truly resolves because there's no resolution to grieve. Did their son die? Was he kidnapped? Is he alive somewhere, wondering about the family he never knew? Every September 24th they remember. Local media sometimes runs anniversary pieces, 30 years later. Whatever happened to Christopher Hayes? Followed by 40 years later, and 50 years later. The articles recycle the same photographs, the same facts, the same questions. Nothing new. Nothing helpful. Technology advances. DNA becomes a powerful investigative tool. Fingerprint databases go digital. Computers make comparisons faster. But without evidence, without leads, without direction, the technological revolution doesn't help. The Christopher Hayes file remains dormant. In 2010, Detective Morrison is 63 years old. He reads a newspaper article about DNA genealogy catching a serial killer. He clips it out. He saves it. Part of him wonders, could this technology help with Christopher? Could genetic databases finally solve the mystery that consumed his career? But the answer seems impossible. Without anyone to compare Christopher's DNA against, without a suspect, the databases are useless. The case appears to be a permanent mystery, one that will follow the Hayes family and Detective Morrison to their graves. No one imagined that 2024 would change everything. Monday, March 18, 2024. A man in Madison, Wisconsin, age 54, healthy with no knowledge of the truth, submits his DNA to a genealogy website. It's a casual decision, driven by curiosity about his heritage and family history. He's lived a quiet, unremarkable life. He has a good job. He has friends. He has a family that loves him. He has no idea that his DNA is about to unravel everything. 3 weeks later he receives an email notification. A DNA match. Close match. Very close. Sibling level match. His heart races. He's always wondered about his biological family. He was adopted, his mother told him when he was 30. A wonderful woman named Patricia, a retired nurse, had raised him after adoption. She never provided details. She said only that it was a private arrangement, that he was wanted, that he was loved. The genealogy match leads him to a support group for adoptees searching for biological families. He reaches out. He provides his DNA information. He begins asking questions. The genealogy company cross-references his data with cold case databases. It's an automated process, a new matching system designed to reunite lost families and potentially solve crimes. An algorithm flags his profile. A match to a case from 1971. Christopher Hayes. Missing from Henry Ford Hospital, Detroit, Michigan. On May 6, 2024, a retired detective receives a call from the Michigan State Police Cold Case Unit. We might have something, they say. DNA genealogy match. Possible identity on the Hayes child. The detective's name is Robert Chin. He's 52 years old. He's never worked the Hayes case. He's inheriting it in its final moments. He listens to the information. He confirms the DNA match independently. He contacts the Hayes family. Then he calls the man in Wisconsin. Your name might not be what you think, Chin tells him. In 1971, a 1-year-old boy disappeared from Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit. DNA evidence suggests that boy is you. The man sits in silence. His entire existence, 54 years of memories, relationships, identity, suddenly becomes unstable. He's not who he thought he was. His mother, the woman who raised him, who loved him, who was his entire world, she's his kidnapper. The Hayes family receives a call. After 53 years of anniversaries, of wondering, of grief that never resolved, they learn their son is alive. Their son has been alive the entire time, living a quiet life in Wisconsin, completely unaware that he was ever missing. Within 48 hours, the story explodes nationally. Media outlets around the world carry the headline, Missing Child Found Alive After 53 Years, DNA Genealogy Solves Cold Case. Christopher Hayes, now 54 years old, learns his real name. He learns about the hospital disappearance. He learns about the detective who spent decades searching for him. He learns about parents he's never met, a family he never knew, a life that was stolen from him before he had memories to form. The impossible has become real. The unsolved has been solved. But the resolution brings as many questions as answers. The focus shifts to Patricia, the woman who raised Christopher, the woman who took him from Henry Ford Hospital on September 24, 1971. She was 41 years old at the time. She worked as a registered nurse at the hospital. She had access to the maternity ward. She knew the layout. She knew the security protocols. She knew the shift changes. Patricia had no children of her own. She'd wanted children desperately. She'd been married once, divorced after 5 years. Her husband said she was too focused on work. After the divorce, she poured her life into nursing. She helped other women's children be born. She held newborns. She felt the weight of their small bodies. And every time she left the hospital, the ache in her chest grew deeper. In 1971, on September 24th, something shifted inside her. Perhaps it was a mental health crisis. Perhaps it was a moment of compulsion. Perhaps it was desperation crystallized into action. She walked into the maternity ward during shift change. She walked past Christopher Hayes' crib. And she made a decision. She took him. Not hastily. Not carelessly. The decision involved preparation. She had already obtained falsified birth certificate documentation. She had already planned her escape to Wisconsin. She had already arranged housing. She had already constructed a new identity for the child. The taking of Christopher wasn't spontaneous. It was premeditated. She walked out of Henry Ford Hospital with a child who wasn't hers. She drove to Wisconsin. She established herself in a quiet community. She became a loving, devoted mother to the boy she'd kidnapped. She never told him he was adopted, not for 24 years. She protected him. She educated him. She raised him with the fierce devotion of a mother who knows, deep in her soul, that she stole something infinitely precious. When investigators finally interviewed her in 2024, Patricia was 96 years old. She was frail. She was confused. She was also strangely at peace. I loved him, she said. I gave him a good life. I was wrong to take him, but I loved him with every part of my being. She was arrested. Charged with kidnapping, falsifying documents, identity fraud, and more. The legal system didn't know how to prosecute someone who had committed a crime but had raised the victim as her own child, with love, care, and dedication. Patricia died in custody in August 2024, 7 months after her arrest, at 96 years old. She never stood trial. She took most of her story to the grave, her motivations, her emotional state, the exact moment she decided to take the child. We know what she did. We'll never fully understand why. The reunion happens on June 15, 2024, at a neutral location, a community center in Madison, Wisconsin. Media trucks surround the building. Police maintain a perimeter. Inside, a family that has never met prepares to become whole again. Christopher Hayes, the name he legally carries now, though he's been David Wilson for 54 years, walks into a room and sees people with his eyes. His biological sister has his exact nose. His biological father has his height. His biological mother has the same expression of wonder, of grief, of longing that everyone in the room is feeling. "Hello," his mother says. Her voice breaks. "I've waited so long to say your name." He embraces her. It's awkward and beautiful and complicated. He's a grown man. She's an elderly woman. They've missed everything, his childhood, his adolescence, his entire life. They can't recover that time. They can only acknowledge it's been lost. But there's also genuine warmth. His siblings tell him about themselves. His parents tell him about the day he disappeared, the 53 years of waiting, the miracle of having him found. He listens and tries to process. This is his family, but also these are strangers who happen to share his DNA. The complications are immense. His adoptive mother, the woman he's called mom his entire life, is now revealed as his kidnapper. How does he reconcile love for her with the reality of what she did? How does he honor the woman who raised him while acknowledging that she committed a crime? "She was wrong to take me," he tells reporters. "But she loved me. She gave me a good life. I don't know how to feel about that." His biological family listens. They struggle with their own emotions. Their son was stolen from them. But the person who stole him also loved him, raised him, protected him. The narrative of good and evil, of victim and perpetrator, refuses to be simple. Over the following weeks, Christopher begins a slow process of integration. He visits Detroit for the first time since infancy. He sees the hospital where he disappeared. He sees the neighborhood where his parents raised other children in his absence. He sees photographs of himself as a 1-year-old before the world fractured. He grieves for the life he didn't have. He honors the life he did have. He tries to build a bridge between his two identities, David Wilson, the man he was, and Christopher Hayes, the boy he was always supposed to be. It's not a simple happy ending. It's a human story of love, loss, justice, and the impossibility of recovering time. Patricia's death in August 2024 created a legal void. She was never prosecuted. She never confessed formally. She never faced a judge. The criminal case against her dissolved into bureaucratic closure without resolution. Some families wanted prosecution. The Hayes family itself was divided, some members angry, others sympathetic to the complexity of the situation. The broader questions remained: how did hospital security fail so completely? What systemic changes could prevent another disappearance? Henry Ford Hospital commissioned an independent investigation. The results were damning. Security protocols were inadequate. Staff training was insufficient. Shift changes created dangerous gaps. The report recommended massive overhauls to hospital security procedures nationwide. These recommendations were adopted. In the years following the case's resolution, hospitals across America implemented new protocols: electronic monitoring of nurseries, biometric access to maternity wards, continuous surveillance, mandatory background checks for all staff. The institution that failed Christopher Hayes became a model for institutional reform. Detective Marcus Morrison, now 97 years old, received a call from Detective Robert Chin. "We solved it," Chin told him. "Your case. After all these years." Morrison wept. 53 years of carrying a mystery, of wondering, of obsessing, finally resolved. The boy he'd searched for was alive. The case that defined his career had an ending, even if that ending was complicated. Christopher Hayes himself struggles with the philosophical questions. "I was a victim," he says. "But I was also cared for. My mother, my adoptive mother, gave me a good life. That doesn't erase what she did. But it complicates how I see it." The Hayes family finds a tentative peace. They've recovered their son, but the 53 years can't be recovered. They're strangers who share blood. They're trying to build a relationship on a foundation of lost time. As for Detective Morrison, he dies peacefully in his sleep on September 24, 2024, 53 years to the day after Christopher Hayes disappeared. The case that consumed his life found its resolution 3 months before he did. One could say he was finally able to let go. On a gray December morning, A small gathering occurs at the grave of Christopher Hayes' parents. His biological parents, long deceased, who never lived to see their son return to them. Christopher stands at the grave. He places flowers. He speaks to people he never knew in the language of reunion and grief. "I don't know who I'm supposed to be," he says quietly, "but I know I'm yours. I'm sorry I took so long to come home." And in that moment something shifts. The mystery doesn't vanish. The lost time doesn't materialize. But perhaps, just perhaps, there's a small, fragile beginning of peace. Some cases can be solved. But some mysteries can't be unsolved. They can only be survived.